Killer Hospital. Rain lashed against the ambulance window in a relentless assault, blurring the skeletal silhouette of the city into an impressionistic nightmare. Inside, the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only counterpoint to the storm's fury. I gripped my mother's hand, her face a canvas of worry etched by years of battling a debilitating illness. We were headed for Mercy Haven Hospital, a hulking Gothic monolith that loomed on the outskirts of the city like a mausoleum. Mercy Haven wasn't my first choice. Its reputation was shrouded in hushed whispers of unexplained disappearances and bizarre medical practices. But desperation, as they say, makes fools of us all. The specialists there, so they claimed, were the only ones who might offer a glimmer of hope. We were greeted by an unervingly sterile lobby, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. The silence pressed in on me, thick and unnatural. A single receptionist, a gaunt woman with eyes that seemed permanently fixed on some unseen horizon, sat behind a monolithic oak desk. Her smile, when she offered one, was tight-lipped, like someone holding a secret too terrible to release. The hallways we traversed echoed with a bone-chilling quiet. No cheerful chatter of nurses, no anxious murmurs of families. Just an oppressive silence punctuated by the distant, rhythmic clatter of metal on metal. It was as if the hospital itself held its breath. My mother's room was at the end of a long corridor bathed in an eerie green light emanating from a single flickering bulb. The room itself was Spartan, painted a sickly shade of yellow. The only decoration was a crucifix hanging askew on the wall, its silver corpus tarnished and dull. A tall, gaunt doctor, his face obscured by a thick beard and deep-set shadows, entered. He introduced himself as Dr. Blackwood, his voice a dry rasp that sent shivers down my spine. His examination was cursory, his eyes flitting across my mother's frail form with an unsettling dispassion. "We'll run some tests," he said finally, his voice devoid of warmth. "But frankly, Miss Thorne, your situation is precarious." Days blurred into nights. The tests were endless, painful procedures carried out by nurses with vacant eyes and unsettling smiles. Every interaction with the staff fueled a growing unease. The whispers, more prominent now, spoke of patients who vanished without a trace, of strange rituals performed behind closed doors. One night, a blood-curdling scream echoed down the hall. I raced towards the source, my heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs. The scream came from a room across from my mother's. Bursting through the door, I froze. On the bed, a man lay strapped down, his eyes bulging in terror. Two nurses, dressed in crimson scrubs far too reminiscent of blood, held him down. Dr. Blackwood stood over him, his face contorted in a maniacal grin as he plunged a syringe filled with an inky black liquid into the man's chest. The scream abruptly cut off. The nurses released the man, his body going limp. Dr. Blackwood turned his bloodshot eyes towards me. A chilling smile stretched across his face. "Just some routine treatment, Mr. Thorne. Nothing to worry about." I stumbled back, my mind reeling. What had I gotten myself into? Panic clawed at my throat. I had to get my mother out of here. But how? My phone, inexplicably, had no reception. Every exit I attempted to find was mysteriously blocked. Mercy Haven was a prison, and my mother, a prisoner condemned to an unknown fate. One night, fueled by desperation, I decided to explore the abandoned wing of the hospital, a section cordoned off by a red biohazard tape. The air here was thick with the oppressive stench of decay. Cobwebs clung to the walls, and peeling paint revealed dark, ominous stains beneath. Suddenly, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. A figure, shrouded in shadow, watched me from the darkness. As I inched closer, the figure materialized. It was a patient, a young woman with wild eyes and sunken cheeks, her hospital gown hanging loosely on her emaciated frame. "They take them," she rasped, her voice barely a whisper. "They take them for experiments. Don't let them take you." Before I could question her further, a guttural roar echoed through the hallway. A hulking figure, its body an amalgamation of twisted limbs and stitched flesh, lumbered towards us. This wasn't a patient. This was something else, something monstrous. The woman screamed and bolted. I followed close behind, the creature's heavy footsteps pounding the floorboards in relentless pursuit. We reached a dead end, a bricked-up doorway. Panic seized me, but then the woman pointed above. A rickety metal ladder descended from a dusty hatch in the ceiling. With a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed the ladder and scrambled up, pulling the woman after me. The creature slammed into the door below, its frustrated roars shaking the very foundation of the building. The hatch led to a cramped, dusty attic. Cobwebs clung to everything, and the air hung thick with the scent of mildew. We huddled in a corner, the sounds of the creature's rage echoing faintly from below. Fear gnawed at me, but the woman's terrified eyes instilled a grim determination. "This place," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. "It was built on a place of darkness. An old asylum, they say. They built Mercy Haven on top of it, hoping to bury the evil. But it seems..." She trailed off, her words lost in a choked sob. Time blurred as we huddled in the attic, the storm outside mirroring the one brewing within me. Every creak, every groan from the floorboards below sent shivers down my spine. Sleep offered no solace, filled with nightmares of grotesque surgeries and twisted creatures. Finally, the storm outside subsided, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The woman, revitalized by a sliver of hope, shared a whispered plan. There was a ventilation shaft leading out of the attic, a risky route but potentially our only escape. With newfound resolve, we pried open the rusted access panel, revealing a narrow, dark tunnel. It reeked of dust and stale air, but it was freedom. We squeezed ourselves in, navigating the claustrophobic space in complete darkness. The journey seemed to last for an eternity. My body ached, but the thought of the horrors below propelled me forward. Finally, after what felt like an agonizing climb, we reached the end of the shaft. A sliver of moonlight peeked through a vent grate. With a combined effort, we pushed it open, tumbling out onto the rain-slicked rooftop. The city lights stretched before us, a beacon of hope in the darkness. But our escape was far from over. As we stumbled across the rooftop, a chilling voice echoed from behind. "Leaving so soon, Mr. Thorne?" Dr. Blackwood stood on the opposite end of the roof, his silhouette stark against the moonlit sky. Behind him, flanked by two crimson-clad nurses, stood my mother, her eyes glazed over, a look of vacant compliance etched on her face. They had already begun the treatment. Despair threatened to engulf me, but the woman at my side, her eyes burning with a desperate courage, lunged for Dr. Blackwood. In the ensuing struggle, she shoved him towards the edge of the roof. A scream, cut short by a sickening thud. Dr. Blackwood was gone. The nurses looked at each other, their expressions confused. The treatment needle slipped from one of their hands, clattering to the roof. Seizing the moment, I grabbed my mother's hand and we ran. Across the rooftop, down a precarious fire escape, and finally into the waiting arms of the storm. We hailed a cab, the rain washing away the grime and horror of Mercy Haven. As we sped away, I glanced back at the hulking silhouette of the hospital in the distance. It seemed to crouch in the darkness, a silent testament to the evil that resided within. My mother's recovery was long and arduous, but with the help of a specialist at another hospital, she eventually regained her strength. We never spoke of Mercy Haven again, but the memory of that night, the screams, the monstrosities, would forever be etched in my mind. Mercy Haven may have been a killer hospital, but in the end, it was the courage of a stranger and the unwavering love for my mother that pulled me from the clutches of that macabre institution. However, a part of me wonders what became of the other patients, lost souls trapped within the dark embrace of Mercy Haven, their screams forever swallowed by the silence. The Harvester's Canvas. Alara hunched over her canvas, the cramped studio a furnace in the perpetual twilight of Neo-Detroit. Her brushstrokes were violent, mimicking the thrashing figures in her nightmare. A city swallowed by a writhing mass of tentacles, each eye a screaming human face. A low growl rumbled in her gut. Not hunger, but a cold emptiness gnawing at her creativity. Another dud, she spat, flinging the brush across the room where it clattered harmlessly against a mountain of rejected canvases. Suddenly, a rap at the door. Alara flinched, fear a familiar, unwelcome guest. Opening the door a crack revealed a slick figure in a black suit, his face obscured by the brim of a wide-brimmed hat. "Alara Thorne?" he inquired, his voice polished like obsidian. "Who wants to know?" "The name's Silas. I represent a patron of the arts." A smile hinted beneath the brim, devoid of warmth. Intrigue battled with suspicion. No one visited Alara, let alone an art patron. Yet, desperation gnawed at her. "Come in," she sighed, stepping back. Silas sauntered in, taking in the squalor with a flicker of distaste. He gestured at a particularly disturbing painting, a portrait of a woman with hollow eyes feeding on her own reflection. Intriguing, fear, raw and potent. Alara watched him warily. "What do you want?" "Let's say your talent has come to our attention. We have a proposition." Silas explained TerraCorp and the fear trade, his voice devoid of moral qualms. He spoke of nightmares as a currency, harvested for the entertainment of the elite. "That's sick," Alara recoiled. Silas' smile widened. "Perhaps, but lucrative. You become a fear artist. We pay handsomely for your nightmares." He laid out a contract, a shimmering document that promised a life beyond penury. Alara's throat tightened. The nightmares had always haunted her, but now they could be a weapon against this oppressive world, or a cage trapping her sanity. Desperation gnawed at her resolve. She signed. The nightmares intensified. No longer fleeting glimpses, they became operatic horrorscapes. Alara became a conduit, channeling primal fears into grotesque tableaus. The harvester appeared, a skeletal figure with eyes like molten gold, feeding on her terror. Each visit left her drained, a hollow shell. Fame arrived, but not the kind she yearned for. Her paintings became a sensation in the decadent TerraCorp clubs, watched by masked figures who reveled in the simulated terror. Alara became a prisoner in her own mind, the line between reality and dream blurring. One night, in a nightmare fueled by paranoia, Silas' smile transformed into the harvesters. He confessed TerraCorp wasn't selling fear. They were feeding it to something ancient and malevolent, a monstrous entity lurking beneath the city, kept dormant by the constant influx of fear. Panic jolted Alara awake. The revelation chilled her to the bone. She had become a cog in a horrifying machine, feeding a creature that could consume them all. The guilt gnawed worse than the nightmares. Alara started researching TerraCorp, piecing together scraps of information from the fringes of the internet. She found a small group of rebels, the Dreamweavers, who fought the corporation. Reaching out was a risk, but silence meant doom. The contact point was a derelict library, filled with dusty tomes on forgotten dreams. There she met Kai, a young man whose eyes held the same haunted awareness as hers. He confirmed her fears. TerraCorp was awakening an ancient evil. Together, they planned. Using her nightmares, Alara would create a weaponized dream, a beacon of rebellion broadcasted into every connected mind. It was a risky gamble, but hope flickered in the darkness. The night of the broadcast arrived. Exhausted and terrified, Alara lay down, strapped to a neural amplifier stolen from TerraCorp. She painted a dream, a city rising against the harvester, a tide of defiance fueled by the victim's fear. The machine hummed to life, draining her. Images flooded her mind. A child screaming, a lover lost, the city crumbling. Then, a spark. The tide turned. The city fought back. The harvester recoiled. Alara woke to a chaotic scene. Sirens wailed, the city in an uproar. Dream and reality had collided. The people, fueled by her dream, stormed the TerraCorp headquarters. Alara stumbled out of the hidden room, the cheers of the rebellion echoing through the underground library. Kai rushed to her side, his face alight with a mixture of relief and awe. "It worked," he breathed, his voice hoarse. Images flickered across a holographic screen nearby, chaotic news reports showing riots erupting throughout Neo-Detroit. People, eyes wide with a new kind of fear, were no longer passive consumers of terror but active participants in their own fight for survival. But amidst the chaos, a cold dread settled in Alara's stomach. The dream hadn't shown the harvester's defeat, only its retreat. Where did it go? What did it have planned? Her worries were confirmed when a garbled message crackled through the library's ancient radio. It was a TerraCorp technician, his voice frantic. "It's awake. It's feeding. The shields are failing." The city's euphoria shattered. Real, raw fear gripped everyone as the ground began to tremble. A monstrous roar echoed from the depths, a sound that resonated with primal terror. The ancient evil TerraCorp had awakened was stirring. Alara knew they had a second fight on their hands, a fight against something far beyond nightmares. But this time, they had an advantage, the collective fear of the city, now channeled towards a common enemy. Kai explained a plan passed down through the Dreamweavers, a desperate gamble. They would use the remaining stolen amplifiers, strategically placed around the city, to create a unified dream. In Alara's mind's eye, a vision formed, a vast, shimmering barrier woven from the very fabric of fear. Not the fear that paralyzed, but the fear that empowered, the fear of a united city fighting for its survival. Days turned into a blur of frantic activity. Alara, fueled by adrenaline and a newfound sense of purpose, worked with Kai and the Dreamweavers to create the Dream Shield. They used Alara's paintings as anchors, their macabre imagery a twisted form of inspiration. The city felt like a coiled spring, tense with anticipation. Then the tremor intensified. The ground seemed to split open as a monstrous, squid-like creature erupted from the bowels of the city, its tentacles lashing out, buildings crumbling under their touch. Panic threatened to engulf Alara, but Kai's hand on her shoulder steadied her. As one, the amplifiers pulsed to life. Alara closed her eyes, picturing her dream, the city united, bathed in the golden light of defiance. The creature screeched, its monstrous eyes reflecting a flicker of fear. A shimmer filled the air, a wall of collective fear solidifying into a shimmering barrier. The creature slammed into the barrier, its tentacles writhing in frustration. The dream shield held, pulsating with the city's combined terror. The air crackled with raw power, a horrifying beauty born from desperation. The battle raged on, the dream shield straining under the creature's onslaught. Alara felt her energy waning, but the cheers of the resistance fueled her. Buildings became battlegrounds. Everyday citizens turned into makeshift warriors, their fear channeled into a weapon. Days bled into nights. Sleep became a luxury, every flicker of exhaustion a betrayal. Then, a turning point. The creature, weakened by the constant assault of the dream shield and battered by the resistance forces, began to slow. Terror twisted its monstrous face into a mask of desperation. The final push came at dawn. Using a stolen TerraCorp weapon, a beam of concentrated fear, the rebels struck a critical blow. The creature shuddered, a deafening screech tearing through the city. Then, with a final, earth-shaking tremor, it vanished back into the chasm from whence it came. Silence descended, heavy and surreal. Exhausted but exhilarated, Alara fell to her knees, the taste of victory bittersweet. The city bore the scars of the battle, but it stood, a testament to human resilience. The fear hadn't been eradicated, but it had been transformed, a necessary tool in their arsenal. As the city began to rebuild, Alara knew her role as a fear artist was over. The nightmares would likely remain, a constant reminder of the battle fought and the horrors witnessed. But she would continue to create, this time dreams of hope and rebuilding. A new future painted with the collective courage of a city that refused to succumb to fear. And somewhere, deep within her, a new kind of inspiration bloomed, fueled not by terror, but by the resilience of the human spirit.